Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. First up is Sleepy Hollow update. Who's gonna, Jeff?
All right. It's hard to, oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Hello, my name is Jeff Condon, Leisure Services Manager for Polk County Conservation. Over the last 2 years, I've been focused on revitalizing the Sleepy Hollow Sports Park. So I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for allowing me the time to present the vision for Sleepy Hollow's future. Your leadership and support have been instrumental in bringing us to this point. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to present our progress and plans. Along with the Board of Supervisors and the Polk County Conservation Board, several of whom are here today, I look forward to our continued collaboration in bringing this vision to life. Together, we're not just revitalizing a park, but creating a lasting legacy for our community. After an incredible first year of operations, we are building on our successes and addressing the challenges head on. As we prepare for the future, our vision remains clear, transforming Sleepy Hollow into a year-round destination for recreation and community engagement. Whoops, that's quick. Sleepy Hollow opened to the public in 1994. The park was privately owned and operated until Polk County purchased it in the fall of 2022. Since acquiring Sleepy Hollow just 2 short years ago, we've made significant strides and laid the groundwork for its future. Much of this progress, while perhaps invisible, has been critical to our operations. We've removed numerous obsolete structures, upgraded plumbing and electrical systems, and we've hired our core leadership team as well as over 30 on-call staff. Sorry. We've extensively investigated and tested our infrastructure and grounds, and we created and launched a comprehensive marketing and rebranding campaign. We've also doubled the size of the pond and invested in the largest snowflakes tubing hill in the world. Sleepy Hollow continues to operate the popular Renaissance Fair and Scream Park. Utilizing the RFP process, we've partnered with a concessionaire to operate these events on our grounds. We maintain the grounds and facilities to ensure a successful experience for all. In addition to these events, we host a variety of other programs and activities throughout the year and plan to expand our events calendar. This summer, we successfully brought the operations of the State Fair camping in-house for the first time. The camper feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We also introduced new seasonal events like the Pre-Fair Frenzy and Fall Finale, which were very popular. While the season had many achievements, we did face challenges. Chief among them was the failure of our conveyor lift, which shortened our season. On a positive note, we were able to identify a local company to service our Italian-made lift, and were able to reopen and finish the season. Our newly expanded pond has proven to be much more complex than a simple hole in the ground. It doesn't retain water yet. We are working with our internal experts as well as our contractor and engineer and have a plan in place to complete this important element. If you've been down snowflakes, you've probably noticed the misting system. It is the mist that helps you cruise down the hill faster than you're legally allowed to drive down Dean Avenue. The misting system utilizes a mile of pipe to carry water to 650 water nozzles. In order to keep the system in tip-top shape, it is necessary to winterize the water lines and let them hibernate until we're able to open in the spring. Eventually, we will have a new snowmaking system which will make snow on top of snowflakes, which will then create a winter tubing surface in that area. When we purchased Sleepy Hollow, we were aware of the limitations of the existing infrastructure, including the non-functioning chairlift and broken snowmaking system. Until we successfully fundraise to upgrade these systems, we will not be able to offer a winter season. We did successfully bounce back after the setback and finish the season strong. offering skiing and snowboarding as planned. The feedback from the skiing and snowboarding community was outstanding, with fantastic reviews across the board. We welcomed first-time skiers who not only tried the sport, but later returned for more, along with expert skiers who came back time and time again, even buying season's passes. Fall brought another exciting milestone, which you can see here, with the installation of our world-class Musco lighting system. The addition of these lights not only allows us to expand our operating hours, but also enhances the experience with the dynamic color-changing light shows, adding a new level of energy and excitement. Be on the lookout for a growing slate of activities and events to come as we continue to conceptualize and plan for the future and get more community members to Sleepy Hollow. So this past year, we partnered with the industry-leading consultancy firm, the SE Group, to thoroughly analyze our facilities, location, and vision for Sleepy Hollow. They conducted an in-depth evaluation of our demographics, use patterns, and infrastructure, and provided projections for our 3-season and 4-season usage. To achieve our goals, the consultants emphasized the importance of implementing a robust marketing campaign and maintaining a strong commitment to reinvesting in our facilities to ensure they remain in top condition. Here in this chart, you see highlights the projections for next year, reflecting on our plans to open 2 months earlier than we did this past year and lay the groundwork to expand to a 4th season, a traditional winter season. Opening in the winter is critically important for maximizing revenue and leveraging our park's potential. This 4th winter season is a key investment in the park's long-term sustainability and success. Fundraising is the cornerstone of achieving our vision for Sleepy Hollow. A revitalized Sleepy Hollow enhances our expanding portfolio of amenities on the east side. These amenities help to create economic and cultural enrichment for the area, and we commissioned a fundraising feasibility study and received very positive feedback from local participants of the study, confirming strong growth potential and reinforcing the viability of our vision. Here is a conceptual rendering of what the future lodge could look like. The new lodge will be ADA accessible, addressing limitations of our current facility and ensuring inclusivity for all guests. The lodge is essential to supporting 4-season operations and expanding our capacity for public and private events. Our fundraising campaign is what will make this vital improvement possible, paving the way for a dynamic and versatile space for the community. Whoops. Okay. To achieve our vision of 4-season operations, we've identified a $13 million funding goal. The public has been incredibly supportive of this effort, with the $10 million target already receiving positive feedback. The remaining $3 million needed for the critical infrastructure improvements will require collaboration with local, state, and potentially other partners to secure that funding. Campaigns like this often shy away from funding infrastructure, and we'll be focusing on building partnerships with key stakeholders to cover the remaining costs, that $3 million. And on to the timeline. Our fundraising efforts will take place through 2025, ending in 2026, with design, engineering, and construction slated for 2026 and 27. We anticipate opening in 27 with new amenities. Again, I want to thank you for your time and continued commitment to this project, and I welcome any questions, comments, or ideas that you may have.
Questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So, what do you have booked for the lodge right now? What's coming up? What, is there weddings? Do you have anything booked at the lodge at all?
We've had a lot of interest in the lodge.
No. What do you have booked at the lodge right now?
Right now, we don't currently have anything booked for the lodge.
Okay. So, my understanding was that, and I hear your comments today, that this was going to be a year-round venue, and, you know, purchased it in 2022, and now we're talking about, what, 2027 before it can become a venue. We didn't probably go into it knowing that we needed to replace all kinds of plumbing and pipes and all those things, or did we know that, or we just haven't been able to complete that, or? This is my district, and I get these questions. The chamber's asking questions. A lot of people are asking these same questions. They assumed that it was gonna be open when we said it was gonna be open.
So Rich Leopold with Conservation, and when we bought the facility, we knew a lot of the equipment and everything else was non-functional. It had been sitting there for a couple of years already because of COVID. It was actually closed 3 years before we bought it. So when we got it, and Jeff is an expert in the industry, and when we went and looked at the snowmaking equipment and what have you, you can't even buy parts for the equipment that was out there. So we knew that the snowmaking operation was not going to be viable when we bought it. As far as the building, there were some surprises in the building that were not pleasant. There was black mold. The geothermal system was bad. And so we had to treat a lot of the plumbing and the black mold issues and things like that just to make it workable for staff that's there in the events that we're having right now. So eyes wide open. We did know a lot of that. There were a few surprises when we got it. As far as the operation, so when we knew that the snow wasn't going to work as far as the ski lifts and the snowmaking operation and everything else, that's when we said about how do we get this up and running as quickly as possible, knowing that we're going to have a longer fundraising campaign. That's when Snowflex came in, because it's like we can do that. We put bond money toward it. We did it fast, and we got that ability, knowing that we were going to then go into a much larger fundraising campaign for the lifts, the snowmaking equipment, and a new lodge.
The reason I'm asking these questions is because I drive by there a lot, and it looks like a ghost town about every time that I go by there. So when did we realize or come to the conclusion that the pond was not going to work as far as being able to, you needed to reline it and all that type of things? I'd never heard that until just recently.
So the whole construction project that we did was like $1.3 million. And this was all the earthwork for the hill that had to do with the concrete pour on the hill and everything else that we did, and the pond was part of that. When we first did the pond, we took the existing pond and then we made it bigger. And to do, we needed to do that for the water, for the snow hill and everything else, but also as an amenity, because we're putting a perimeter trail, we're gonna have a nice fishery and everything else in there. When that happened, it's in an alluvial floodplain, and when that happened, we were hoping that our first plan was gonna work. It did not, and not just us, we don't know, I don't know how to make a pond. We hired professionals with Shive Hattery, we had a contractor on site to do it, and both of them have been held responsible for some of the things that didn't happen that were supposed to happen. So we've gotten a little bit of their hide out of that one, and now we have our plan B, which has to do with using bentonite on the facility. We've got some of it on our locally and a couple of trucks that are coming. So we believe that our plan B is going to work to seal up that pond. But just reiterating, that was a small part of an overall $1.3 million contract. Everything else went really, really well. And this one here went a little bit outside of contingency, but not much. But we hope to have water in it. I'm not sure with the weather, if we're going to be able to do it yet this fall or if it's going to be early spring. But that pond is integral to the entire operation. We have to have the pond.
So you look to maybe what, next spring before up and running out there with like in April, you know, or?
Well, Jeff, do you know?
Yeah, we'll be reopening in March for skiing and snowboarding again, then we'll transition into the tubing season. And then we plan to offer tubing and skiing, so skiing will be 1.5 days a week, and then the rest will be all tubing,
Okay,
so.
all right, I don't have anything else.
Anybody?
By the way, I did want to mention too the water. So we need the pond for the overall operation because we pull water out of 4 Mile, we store it in the pond, we put it through treatment, it goes down the hill, we recycle it. We can operate off city water, and when we opened up this last year, that's what we did. We just used city water. It's just much more ecological sense and financially efficient to use 4 Mile water than city water, but we can operate without it.
Okay.
When are the previous owners out?
Well, the previous owners are out already, except for they are now the concession. So Rick and Mary Flatt have formed an LLC, and they have other people that they've been working with for years that are part of the leadership of that LLC. And the deal is that Rick and Mary ran it this year, the Renaissance Fair in Spooky Hollow. We had a 1+2 contract with them, so now in years 2 and 3, the other people that have been involved with that are now taking over all the financials, planning, operations, and everything else. So we'll have 2 years with them, and then it'll be an open RFP process again. They'll have the inside track, of course, but
That's for just the Renaissance Fair?
Renaissance Fair and the Scream Park over the Halloween.
Yeah.
The State Fair, so this was the first year that we ran the entire State Fair, and that's a moneymaker for us. That's a good thing. They actually, though, Rick and Mary did the shuttle service for us. So they charged a rate, and then we had them shuttle people back and forth. Now, in the future, we're looking at a bigger idea. I've talked with Jeremy Parsons down at State Fair and talked with DART, and we're looking at whether we want to do it internally, whether there's a way we can partner with State Fair or DART or something to get some kind of shuttle service, but it's yet to be determined what happens next year.
Is the, I'm looking on the back sheet of this, is there a State Fair revenue on here?
There is, but it's conglomerated with others. So if you see the revenues there,
Oh, down at the bottom, 178,000 State Fair camping?
yes. Yes, that is articulated in that. And then in the middle little money spreadsheet chart, you have the 108,000 in 22-23 when we took it over, 322 in 23-24. That's part of State Fair camping. And now that State Fair camping included, and 24-25 forward will all be us doing State Fair camping.
Okay.
I know we charge significantly more than what the former owners charged for State Fair parking. So do you still have, are you still booked into the future with all the spots that we have?
Yeah, we have quite a waiting list.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
even
still,
right.
that's still carrying on, that's good.
It's very popular.
Can we expand? Is that a
Love to.
$1 million question?
So that is a question that we've been talking about. And by the way, yes, we have 4 of our board members here today. We have Greg Lewis, Pam Mullenhauer, Jill Altringer, and Ryan Crane. So we have almost our entire board here today. We are looking into those opportunities. To the north of Dean Avenue, there are a couple landowners up there that we've been parlaying with for quite a while, and hope to have the ability to at least have some overflow parking and some of the other things that we can do up there. So we're looking into it.
One last quick question, Rich. What's the cost for the putting the lining and what have you in that pond back there? The additional cost?
Yeah, what did we pass this last month? Was that $80,000? $80,000.
For what? What'd you ask for the
The
lighting?
lining in that pond.
Right.
Oh,
So, and it's a mineral called bentonite that's trucked out of Wyoming. That it's old volcanic ash. I just learned this last week. That when it hits water, it tends to expand and then cement. So it's the perfect mixture to go in and kind of seal the bottom of the bathtub kind of thing. So we have 4 truckloads of bentonite that are coming, and then will be incorporated into the bottom of that pond.
yes, John.
A couple questions. It's probably obvious, but in your slide that said they prevent the water lines from being freezing as being winterized. I understand that the tubing hill will not be open this winter?
That is correct. The long-term plans are when we are able to have a new snowmaking system, we'll make snow that we blow over the top of snowflakes, then we can groom that. So that's always been a tubing hill. We made it now we're making it a year-round tubing hill with the addition of snowflakes. But until we have that snowmaking system, we will not, it will not be open this winter.
And I assume when the pipes were put in, there was planned for freezing. Is there something being done different now that, when we say to prevent the water lines from freezing?
Right, so
wasn't that part of the initial design?
It is. So they're designed to be drained. So we drain them kind of like a house or a camp would be when in the off season, so they don't freeze. So that's the process we just went through. with this colder weather. So we drain all that, which is what it's designed to do. And then,
But eventually we want to get it where you're operating that all through the winter, right?
yes. So we'll have a separate snowmaking system, which will be on the side, which will blow snow on that, and then we'll groom it in and use the same lift for winter tubing.
Okay, so you won't need the water lines that feed it for the water hill?
No,
winter.
that's correct. That's just for basically the 3 seasons, and then the blowing the snow will be for that 4th season, yeah.
And you got all the grooming equipment, is it all the grooming equipment for the snow hill?
We have one groomer that was with the purchase, and we plan to acquire a second one. That's part of our budget from last year, so.
And then I remember being out there for the opening, I think we were all a little shocked at how slow that conveyor, are people walking up it now, or?
No, so that actually is as fast as that it's legally allowed to go. It's 0.7 meters a second, but because it's so long, it's the longest in the world, it does take a little time. With the addition of the new Musco lights, we have speakers that we're putting on there, and then we have so to help give it make it a little more exciting, a little more entertainment on the way up, because it does take some time to get up that hill. It's about 5.5 minutes. And we do plan on adding a few more features, just interactive, to give you something to do while you're going up the hill. But that's a good point.
And then, one of the slides talks about marketing. I assume, had marketing all been built into the budget, marketing costs from the get-go, or is that an additional consideration?
We do have marketing built into the budget, and we will, hopefully be ramping that up as we increase our the seasons. So when we go from 3 to 4 seasons, but yeah, marketing is a focal point.
And we might get this more into your budget meeting, Rich, but what remains, I just don't recall and couldn't find it, for the money that Polk County has put in so far? What remains in terms of expectations, or that has been budgeted for additional funds from the county into this Operation Enterprise Fund, what have you?
Right.
What spurred that was the $3 million infrastructure cost on your chart.
Yeah, on the chart there, if you look at first of all, there was the acquisition, right? The $1.75 million that Polk County put up for acquisition. After that, when you look at operation and equipment cost in that second grid down there, the operation cost has now ramped up and it leveled off, and in fact, we're not going to hit that because we weren't open, so it's going to be lower than that. But that is what full staffing will look like and full operations of Sleepy Hollow. The equipment cost, you'll see that there was a $300 and an $875 that were put in there in consecutive years. So that's equipment coming from Polk County that allowed us to buy the vehicles and ATVs and the groomer and ski shop materials. So all of that isn't expended though, because we hadn't needed it. So some of that will be carried over, but all of those equipment costs are listed there. And then that will be zero going forward. That's all we need going into this current operations and the fundraising campaign. So.
Okay, so no, I haven't looked at your decision package. We had that meeting next week.
Right.
There's no additional.
There's no additional that we'll need in the decision package, although we will need the ability to carry forward some of the money that we didn't spend this year, this fiscal year.
That was already budgeted for.
Already budgeted, yeah.
Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the board members that came. Okey dokey. Next up is the housing update. A lot going on in this world on housing.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and start us off and then turn it over to Cynthia, who's going to give some detailed information about Anawim. But what you've got in front of you and what I'm going to go through is first just kind of a real high-level discussion about the various housing conversations, initiatives, projects that are going on in the community right now. And then I'm gonna drill down into the emergency rental assistance 2 funding that we've been talking about for the last year, and put some options for you guys to make decisions on in front of you. So the first page that we're looking at is a grid of all the affordable housing conversations that are taking place in the community right now. Some of you are familiar with these, but the city of Des Moines is working on establishing a community land trust that will be run as a separate nonprofit with the goal of creating permanently affordable homes in our community. They're looking at establishing their board in the first quarter of 2025. I've been working on their advisory committee with them to kind of put some of the documents, like founding documents in place, but they will be making an ask of Polk County for $50,000 for year 1 of operational funds. So what they're looking to do is have Home Inc., who's an established nonprofit housing partner, help them stand up the new nonprofit that will be the Community Land Trust. Amos has been at the table, Waukee's been participating, West Des Moines has been participating, but that initiative has gotten a lot of good traction and should be starting to move forward in the beginning of next year. Des Moines is undergoing a comprehensive housing strategy. They hired CZB. You guys are familiar with them from the work that they did on Invest DSM. They're working to put together a plan on what affordable housing looks like for specifically the city of Des Moines. I've been in on one of those meetings so far, and it sounds like they're going to have a heavy emphasis on rehab, continuing to rehab homes that are in kind of that middle income neighborhood.
Is it the same staff people, Sarah, that we work with that
Yep, Charles,
and his
yep,
group?
yep.
Okay.
So I think they've only had 2 meetings so far, but that's just starting to kick off. We've got the Anawim conversation that we're gonna have today. Greater Des Moines Supportive Housing, you all know Emily Osweiler and the work that she's trying to do to purchase and establish a property to support more permanent supportive housing. She formerly ran the YMCA's Greater Supportive Housing Project. So we'll talk about her project that she's got proposed. Housing Trust Fund is working on a national housing preservation database. Their goal with this is really to get a local vacancy rate per city. I know last year some of you were able to hear the speaker out of Washington who really emphasized vacancy rate as a measurement for how we're doing with housing and affordability in our community. This study done by Housing Trust Fund will give us a local number based on local data.
Sarah, there's a direct correlation, if I remember from that study, between as housing vacancy rate goes down, homelessness goes down.
As vacancy rate goes up, homelessness goes down.
Yeah, you go.
So the tipping point for cities that are kind of in trouble when it comes to homelessness in their housing is about 5% vacancy rate. And at the time that presentation was made, our community was at about 5% vacancy rate. So this conversation tries to include more discussions at the city level about how do cities encourage developing housing of all income levels, because when there's housing for all income levels, then that frees up housing at the lower income levels. So it helps alleviate the homeless issue by just having more housing, period. So we're trying to fold that conversation into everything that's also happening, and then align that with the homeless 5-year strategic plan. So that is a conversation that's happening with Homeward and HCC and the Continuum of Care. I know you're all familiar with all of those organizations, but this is an initiative that came from a homeless analysis gap that was done last year. They laid out the exact number of permanent supportive housing units we need, the exact number of transitional housing units we need, the amount of shelter beds that we need, and they had valued the dollar amount to fill those needs at about $19 million a year at that time. So this next piece of the process is them putting together a strategy on how to actually achieve that. So I know there's also conversations going on at Capitol Crossroad about housing. Mid-Iowa Health has some information in their strategic plan about housing. There's a downtown safety group that was very acutely focused on just safety issues and homelessness in downtown. They're now starting to transition that conversation into affordable housing. So there's just a lot of conversations out there, and I wanted to put that all out there as a starting point with this, and then circle back to it at the end to talk about how maybe you as a board or us as staff can lay some groundwork for merging some of these conversations, because it's a lot. And I think there's some frustration about who's doing what. I mean, even if, let's say we did find $19 million a year to solve this problem, who are we giving it to and to do what? Nobody really knows yet. So trying to get our arms around all of these conversations at once.
Let me jump in,
Yep.
because we probably want to end with that conversation. What's the role we're going to play?
Yep.
But for instance, I don't know if everyone has anyone looked at this, at that study that showed the correlation nationwide between vacancy rate and homelessness. And if when the homeless study was done and this $19 million proposal, if that took in consideration how we're making progress on increasing the vacancy rate. Because if we're just expanding housing, irrespective of cost, we know that lowers the homelessness rate. And so, but if the people are looking at these in silos, that's our concern. Is there's no one table where everyone's looking at all this data and making sure it's a countywide housing strategy. And that's how to get at the homelessness
And that's what
issue.
we're missing, in my opinion.
Hmm?
Because we're missing that
Right.
all-around strategy, and who's gonna lead that? Because right now, I don't think anybody really is. I mean, we've got, Matt sits on the Homeless Coordinating Council, there's Homeward, there's Capital Crossroads, and then we have all these other nonprofits that are trying to get their arms around it.
In different
But
towns
We
or-
need a leader that can actually come together, and Sarah and I have talked about that, so we can strategize and figure out whose role really is it. I mean, it can't just be a burden on Polk County to solve all these issues.
Right. So I was wanting to at least lay that out there so we should have, as you go through, Sarah goes through the context of what we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out here.
And the other thing that I'll add too is, we've got this kind of half of our nonprofit world in our community that's very hyper-focused on, very low-income housing. But we also have, I know there's a number of cities in the metro who are very engaged in this conversation. And, pallet homes is probably not the answer for them, but they want to know what can they do. So I think making sure that the whole spectrum of what can we do about housing is included in this conversation is important. But for now, I want to dial it down to the emergency rental to assistance money. We've talked about this a couple times, and you guys have gotten updates from myself and Brett along the way. As you recall, at the last board staff that we had really talked about focusing on homeless families using this money, working with the city to redevelop vacant infill lots into affordable single-family housing. That has been happening, and I'll give you an update on that, but there's a number of other options that have come up in the meantime as well. But this first slide is really just an overview of the basic rules of the program, if you will. So as you recall, this is money that came directly from the U.S. Treasury. The state had turned it away towards the end of COVID. We were able to get that directly. It was $62 million to start with, and the 75% go directly to rent assistance. That was administered and Baker staff at Impact Community Action Partnership. Once that 75% was spent, the last 25% is allowed to be used for development of new affordable units. And you guys and us all had conversation at the time about making sure that we're using this money to actually create new units. There's a lot of proposals out there to just, further incentivize LIHTC projects or other projects that were already going to happen without this money, and we made the decision to take the a little bit more difficult route and do things ourselves and make sure that we truly are getting more units throughout our community. We also made the decision to align our reporting with the HUD home rules. So Treasury didn't have very robust overall rules as a standalone program, but what they did say is we need to align with one of 8 different federal housing programs, and we chose the home program because the city is so familiar with that. They've got a lot of experience with that. They've been assisting us through the environmental review process and are guiding us on some of the reporting questions that I have as well. The only difference with this is that projects are not approved in advance, so we don't have to, put together a presentation and say, this is our project, give us the money to do it. We can do these projects and report as if we're asking for permission and just have that reporting on hand. So it's a little bit different process, but we're basically going through it as if it is a regular HUD home grant. We'll be maintaining quarterly compliance reports via the Treasury portal. So currently Eric Kuhl is doing that. He's getting the data from Ann Bacon because they're still, reporting on the rental assistance piece. So we'll be transitioning that over to myself and central accounting, and the city has weighed in a little bit on the data that we need to be collecting to stay in compliance. The funds all need to be obligated by September 30th, 2025, and liquidated no later than 120 calendar days after that. So we're down to under a year to get these dollars all obligated. If we have a binding agreement with a subrecipient or a grantee, that counts. So we just have to make sure we spell out very clearly the reporting requirements and what's going to happen with that money. But having an agreement with another partner to spend that money, even if it's after the September 2025 date, that counts as expended.
When you say a partner, there, you're talking about like Home Inc. or something like that?
Yep,
Or, okay,
yep.
One of the five, one,
Yep,
two, three.
so if we, I think we've always talked about housing trust fund as a stopgap. Like if we got to the point where we're like, we can't finish this work,
Right.
we can't get it all done, we could enter into agreement with housing trust fund.
That'd be an
So
option then?
it's
Okay.
obligated on our end, and then they can spend it from
Okay.
there and abide by the same reporting requirements.
All right.
So, the intent is for this money to benefit households at the 50% AMI level, and the allowable uses are the purchase of properties that are going to become affordable, renovation, construction, and then renovation of affordability. They amended it maybe 6 months ago to include, that wasn't one of the initial allowable uses, but they also allow for pre-development activities, so surveying, planning, permitting, appraisals, those kinds of things. The only thing they say that we can't use it for is actual demolition. But I'll talk a little bit about how we can accomplish some of that a little bit later. So any questions about the just general program? I just wanted to give a refresher on that. I know we've talked about it a couple times, but just wanted to put it all in one place.
Layer on there and say, this is all one-time federal money. We didn't write these rules. And we took advantage of the state not moving on this, and we got millions of dollars to help people, but
But it's a short window.
the main goal was we freed up 25% of that money to go
Yes.
towards our bigger issue, which is housing. But it's a tight time frame.
Yep.
So we're just trying to have as much impact as we can. It may not be the most efficient when
Yep.
you have to rush it like this, but those aren't our rules, they're the Fed's
Correct.
rules. So that's what we're trying to focus on here.
And we did spend a ton of time trying to get through the rules. There was just so little given to us, and the Treasury was so unresponsive to questions. We hired RSM, a auditing firm, to do an analysis on the rules and provide recommendations on our very specific questions. So it just took a long time to get the confidence that our ideas were allowable under this. So we finally have that confidence now that I think we can start to move forward. So as a reminder, the initial funding award was $62 million, and the first 75% was spent on direct rental assistance. That leaves us with $15 million to spend on the actual development of affordable units. I've also included in here the amount that we have earned in interest. It's about $2.7 million, probably a little bit more, because I don't think the last quarter or two have been included in this figure. But that's the interest earnings that we have gotten so far from all of that, those millions and millions of dollars just sitting in our funds. So, I think it would be prudent to use that to reach our goals with the housing development as well.
And that interest earnings and the administrative money are not connected to the.
Correct,
The time-
so the
to the
interest,
restrictions of use.
yep, the interest earnings do not, I mean, it's pretty much like general fund money. It is general fund money. It doesn't get tied to all the rules and restrictions and reporting that I talked about earlier. So that's where we have some flexibility, some of these projects that I'm gonna talk about. So, single-family home infill, as you recall, we had collectively decided that we were gonna work with the city of Des Moines to get infill lots that were vacant via our tax sale process. We had 7 that we already had ownership of. I think it started out as 9, but there was a couple that we had to get rid of because of encroachment issues and environmental review issues. But Brett and Dave Williamson, and jump in if you guys want to. I know you're here.
Brett's over there.
Yeah, okay, they're there. Yeah, jump in if you guys want to. But they have been doing so much work to get this plan up and running. So the city of Des Moines has helped with all the environmental review processes that were required as part of the home HUD rules. They've already approved the site plan and the building plan. It's all gonna be 2 or 3 bedroom homes with finished basements. And the idea was literally just copy and paste, take the same house plan and copy and paste. So a builder or developer could say, yep, I'll take 3 of the lots or 4 or all 7 and really find efficiencies in doing all of them at once. So the only thing that we're waiting for as of right now is a sign off from the architect on this plan. We've sent notice out to neighbors, talked to them about encroachment issues. Are we good there, Brett? Yes. Yes? Okay, good. And then once we're done with this architect sign off, then we've got an RFP that's already been developed. County attorney and Brett and his team and procurement have been working for a couple months on this RFP. So we'll issue the RFP for local builders. We have had quite a bit of info. There was some news generated a couple calls from builders, so people are excited to take this project on and run with it. Our estimate is that it will cost about $250,000 for this first phase, and then phase 2 will be next April, and we're hoping to get another 15 to 30 homes, probably 15. But the idea being that this first round of 7 has really ironed out the process and kind of shown the challenges and gotten through the challenges. So it should be a lot easier and faster the next time around. And then as a reminder, all of these homes will be donated to the Community Land Trust when the land trust is up and operational and when the homes are done and have occupants in them. And I've had multiple conversations with the city of Des Moines about that, and they remain excited and encouraged and committed to taking those homes.
So the 15 homes that we hope to start or get through tax sale, is that gonna make the deadline?
Brett, where's Brett?
How can that be possible? Unless it's a
You mean-
modular prefab home.
3D homes.
No, so, I mean, again, the idea is with the first 7, we've worked out all the kinks, hopefully have about everything figured out. And so then into the spring, we do another round of bidding these out. And then the hope is that builders will batch them in groups of 3 or 4, whatever, I guess through the pre-bid process, find out what builders are interested in taking on, but then they can build a home in that 90 to 120 days. So the hope is we get them bid and awarded in, say, July. They have from July until the end of January of next year to get whether it's 3 homes built or 6 homes built. And we think that there's enough capacity in the market to 6 months ago I'd have told you we'd have homes being constructed right now. So so I'm also willing to acknowledge that we're behind, but we're set up for success once we get to the jumping off
Money has
point.
to be spent in September of 25.
Has to be by September, be liquidated by the end of January 26.
Oh, in January of 26.
Yep.
Okay.
Very, very tight window, but excited to get as many homes built as we can. And we're gonna learn through this first batch if it takes them how long it's gonna take them from start to finish. And that's gonna dictate how many we take on, because we don't want half-built homes and then
Correct.
not
We don't.
not get done. But also with the seasons, we're gonna know in September where we're at with
Okay.
with those homes.
But
I
pretty
trust
much everything that's been causing the delays will have been solved by the time we get our next batch of properties ready to go,
Correct.
so. Yep. Thanks,
Okay.
Brett. The next project that I want to highlight is Greater Des Moines Supportive Housing. And again, everything that I'm going through right now is a recommendation for an expenditure out of our ERA 2 funds, going against that balance of 15 million. So Greater Des Moines Supportive Housing, again, you're all familiar with Emily Osweiler and her organization and her goals. She has an offer accepted to purchase the Holiday Inn downtown. I know there's been news coverage on it, so I'm not, breaking any news here, but they do have a purchase offer on the table and accepted. Her plan is to take the 251 hotel rooms and convert it into 160 studio apartments with community spaces, so they can have all the various services that she is very skilled at providing. So again, wraparound services on site. The rehab will begin in the fall of 2025, and their ask of ERA 2 to make this all happen is $3 million towards the purchase price, which is an allowable expense under ERA 2.
What is her construction budget gonna be, Lon?
I haven't seen the construction budget yet.
And
Have
do
you, Angela?
do you know how she's gonna finance the
I don't.
remainder or any of the build-out or demo or anything else?
I haven't seen any of the specifics. Obviously, that'll be something that we'll ask for before any dollars go out the door.
But it's city's driving this, right?
Correct.
So this really becomes a city-managed project, and
Yep.
don't want to totally assume here, but
Yep.
we're hopeful that
They make it happen.
they've got, and we should ask the budget stuff, but they've been working on it, and my presumption would be, even though we want to see it, is how this all, what all the costs are, how this cash flows, how it works. But I haven't seen
And
that
a
yet.
timeline,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
But as Sarah said, the purchase price meets the guidelines, so it doesn't have to be built by the end of January
Okay.
Right.
2026.
Correct.
Because
we're
our
just
3 million
buying it.
qualifies just
Yeah.
for the purchase price,
Yeah.
and that's done.
Okay,
The important piece for me, and I'm glad you see wraparound services are available on site. That's huge, because a lot of times you drop them in development somewhere and then there's no, they're on public transit, right? They're on public,
Yep.
public
I know
transportation.
she's also talked to, Rob Denson with DMAC to
Oh, good.
provide,
Job
services
training.
in there. Quite a few people
Good.
really,
Very
I
good.
think,
That's
so.
Yep.
I don't know how her construction or when it's gonna start or where
We
she.
could have her in for a board staff
Yeah.
as a follow-up.
When we get
Yeah.
closer next
Yeah.
year.
But I know it was all kind of a rushed conversation, trying to make sure that they,
Yeah, cause there were other offers, I think,
Yep.
coming to the table.
yep. The next project that we're recommending expenditures for is the city of Urbandale has purchased the Econo Lodge property and are going to demolish that entire building and redevelop it into affordable housing. They own the property right now. They do not have a developer selected. Their goal is to plan for 50 to 55 units, but everything is very, very, very preliminary in terms of their plan for that right now. But I know Supervisor Brownell has had a lot of conversations about them, with them, and is recommending $500,000 of the interest earnings to assist with the demolition. So, as we mentioned, demolition cannot be used with the true emergency rental assistance money. That's why we would recommend just using the interest earnings on a very smaller scale to help that project. And I think it's important to note that, this is a project that will lie outside the city of Des Moines. And, we struggle to have partners that are willing to work with us on bringing more affordable housing into the suburbs. So this is a great opportunity to advance this conversation about how important it is to, as a region, have affordable housing.
Totally agree.
The next two are properties that Carl and Scott Orth went and visited on Friday. So I know we've kind of dipped our toe in the water a couple times about purchasing multi-unit complexes and converting them into affordable properties. And our kind of back and forth on this has always been, if it's an existing affordable property, we don't want to buy that and displace people who are already, paying affordable rent to put different affordability people in there. So the challenge has been finding market rate or vacant properties that we can purchase that are not in complete disrepair and require, $1 billion of renovation. So Carl and Scott found two properties that kind of meet that criteria. The first is at 2419 Cottage Grove. It's an 8-plex that has 6 2-bedroom units and 2 1-bedroom units. So set up very well for families. I think the 2-bedroom units also have a third room that could be used as a bedroom if needed. The list price for the entire building is $675,000, so that puts it at about $84,000 per unit, which compared to the single family house is extremely affordable from our budget standpoint. There obviously we'll need to get in there and do some due diligence, but there was no obvious deferred maintenance when they went through it. It's in a great neighborhood that's good for families, bus line, and the concept with owning properties like these, again, would be similar to what we're doing with the single family homes, where Polk County General Services would do the property management like we do with all of our group homes. We would have management partners working directly with the families, and then when the land trust is set up, donate the building to them. So this purchase would get us 8 units of affordable housing at about $85,000 per unit. And then similarly, the next property is at 1801 Pleasant Street. It's a 7-plex consisting of 6 2-bedrooms and 1 1-bedroom unit for a list price of $725,000. Again, no visible deferred maintenance, close to services, desirable neighborhood, and the same concept of being managed by us and eventually turned over to the land trust.
Are they vacant right now?
They're vacant, right?
The first building has 4 vacancies, and everybody else is on a month-to-month lease.
Okay,
And so that it's very flexible.
got it.
The other thing I wanted to point out on especially the one on Cottage Grove, is that it has almost 11,000 square feet. These are big units, and these 2 bedrooms have an additional room that would be perfect for children, and all the rooms are big. When we looked at others, we saw other 8-plexes that had 5,000 square feet, and this one, is almost double that.
Well, we're looking for units for families right now, as Eric will attest to here shortly.
These 2-bedroom units are over 1,000 square feet.
Wow.
And I know that the 3-bedroom homes we're building are like 1,100.
Okay,
I would say my one alarm is we've always been reluctant to get into the ownership.
I'm not excited about that at all.
And so,
Well,
and
how temporary is what I wanna know.
this before, and I'm going to put you on the spot. We're hoping this community land trust actually works, right? If it doesn't, are there other,
Not excited about that either.
or not homeless, are there other agencies that could be candidates to turn this over to?
We haven't talked super in depth about this, but we have tossed around ideas about like doing a master lease kind of arrangement with organizations like Impact or Habitat for Humanity or Home Inc., but just literally had an hour, maybe a conversation about it. So as it stands today, no, there's not any other well thought through ideas on the table other than the land trust. I haven't seen any signs that the land trust is not going to go anywhere.
Right.
I feel pretty good about where that organization's going, and I think that with us donating 30-ish properties to them would be a great start for them. It's exactly what a new organization needs to start their portfolio and be successful.
But what I'm hearing is there could be other, we just haven't examined, so it isn't like they
Right.
can't do it. We just
Yep.
haven't looked at other vehicles, if you will, or entities to take these over, so.
Correct, and
That's not foreclosed, yes, okay.
And I'll talk to the city. I know we've got some meetings scheduled with Home Inc. talking about the land trust, but I'll talk to the city about some other options if that, and maybe I'll send a memo to the board about other ideas that are possible if we need to have a backup plan for the land trust. But I think this, in general, the concept of purchasing properties, especially ones that are well-maintained and don't have a huge rehab budget, is a really efficient way to, A, get the money spent, and B, get families in housing. So, any questions about this? We already have, the county attorney's already worked to put together a template purchase agreement and kind of process. I don't know that we've done a lot of property buying at the county, so they've put together a process and a purchase agreement for that if you guys are, if you make the decision to allow us to go forward with that.
And that's a policy decision for you all to make, but I just want to raise that flag. We've always been cautious, and I think appropriately so, and not.
Owning.
Yeah, no, we've just worked fairly well with Annie's shop and the group homes, but not sure we want to venture more into that space. So we just want to be mindful of that as we go forward, and make sure we have good plans to offload these, and will continue the mission we're looking, or purpose we're looking for.
Okay, so to summarize, the investments that, you know, I think I would recommend moving forward with in December, based on, you know, if you guys are welcome to give me feedback on this or ask for additional information before you make a decision, but what I recommend moving forward with is the $500,000 for Urbandale Econo Lodge, with the demolition coming from the interest earnings, $50,000 from the ERA 2 funds to help the Community Land Trust get stood up as its own standalone nonprofit with the help of Home Inc. So Home Inc. would be the recipient of those funds. The Greater Des Moines Supportive Housing, $3 million for the purchase from ERA 2 funds. We'll talk about Anawim. She's gonna have a couple asks for you as well. And then the purchase of both the properties we just went over, and I would put a resolution on just authorizing Public Works to move forward with issuing the RFP and building the 7 houses for a total of $7.75 million, and phase 2 of up to $3.75 million. So that's a total possible investment of about $10 million, and that would get us 252 affordable units, which works out to about $41,000 a unit, and I think that's amazing. So that's just my commentary.
On the Community Land Trust, we have a seat at the table.
Yes, we will get a board seat at the table. They're drafting a 28E agreement on that right now, but all of our conversation has been that we'll get.
So does Waukee, because they're in this, right?
You know, they're at the table at the staff level. Waukee, West Des Moines, us, and Des Moines are the only jurisdictional partners who are at the table. And I can't even tell you how many hours we've spent going back and forth about how you get a for sure seat at the table. So as it stands, we've only made a decision on the city of Des Moines, who's putting in $50, and to put in $50,000. Those are the only 2 guaranteed government seats for now. But the advisory board and what will become the new board will continue to look at how other cities get a seat at the table.
I'm almost thinking we should get 2 seats
Yeah,
and not just 1.
yeah.
I mean, this is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And the way they have the board set up, makeup right now, it's a third residents, so people who are living in these properties, a third community members, and then only a third government and public representatives.
Yeah, I would recommend, first of all, that we get 2, because I'm not sold on this Community Land Trust. So that's one recommendation. I think it's fine that we give 50,000, so we could have the seats at the table. And for me, I'm good with the Econo Lodge, Greater Des Moines Supportive Housing. I think that's a heck of an opportunity to get 160 units or whatever it is. I'd like Eric, before we decide on the, I mean, I think getting 252 units is a great feat when we know we've got a shortage of affordable housings, but I'd like Eric to just talk real briefly on what, I think you sent a memo, or maybe I got this from Sarah, I forget which, on where we're at on these families and how much you're spending and what we need for families.
Yeah, so we fund families placed in hotels by primary health care at 211 who are unsheltered typically. And of course that goes up in bad weather, but when families approach primary health care or 211 after hours, say we're on the streets with nowhere to go, they will do some problem solving with them to explore all alternatives. You have friends or family you can go to, where are you coming from? And they really, in family shelters, they explore all of that. But ultimately, if they don't have any options, they're just going to be in the street with children. They will authorize a hotel. And this even excludes people with cars. So this pool could be bigger, probably should be bigger, where they're placing in hotels. That has gone up dramatically the last year. Just for perspective, in the first quarter of 2024 last year, there were 73 families for 291 nights. And the first quarter of this year, it was 172 families for 700 nights. That
Jesus.
excludes October, which saw a dramatic increase. We haven't even processed all the October invoices yet. We have pushed $100,000 at this point. We're probably projecting, if you assume an increased rate going through the worst months, we're probably projecting a $300,000 expenditure. And that's just for hotels. Primary health care maintains contact with these families while in hotels, continuing to process alternatives, waiting for openings in the family shelters which are chronically full, and there just aren't anything. And the only alternative is sleeping outside. So that's the situation presented to me by primary health care. It doesn't look like it's going to improve anytime soon.
So these units on Cottage Grove and Pleasant, these would be a welcome to you versus hotels?
I don't know that, we wouldn't look at these as like a shelter type
No, family
situation. It
units.
would be a rental unit, there, you know, it would, so we'd have to work with the families on who can afford what in order to go in there, and what kind of support and case services they need. But on the last slide, I do have kind of some other possible uses, and that was one of the notes on there too. When Eric and I and John had this conversation, my question was, well, can we use ERA to build a hotel and build a family shelter? So that's an option too, if anybody wants to go down that road. But we're not looking at these two properties as a shelter type alternative for families, but it would be a true affordable rental for families who can pay some level of rent.
I think Eric's probably the expert in this, but yeah, you've got families that are homeless. We're looking for these to be actually sustainable.
Right.
And cover, and, you know, cover the costs of what rental would be at an affordable rate. But that's different than a family facing homelessness. Even assisting them in getting into an existing facility, you're gonna have a hard time with a landlord taking someone for, say, 2 months rents paid, knowing they're gonna be facing an eviction and 3 and all the costs of that. So we can be careful not to see this as a direct correlation to solving the homeless families problem. And that's why finding out a hotel or not something else we can convert and turning it to a homeless shelter is a more likely, at least, fix to look at right now.
Correct.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay. So this slide is just for conversation. So if you guys are in agreement with everything presented so far, that puts us about 10.4 million in expenditures, not including what Anawim is going to ask for support with, but that leaves us with about just over $7 million to invest in additional projects and uses. So ideas that are out there is something to address the issue that Eric just talked about. There's housing stability services, that's an allowable use, so that would be case management type services. If there's an organization that we wanted to support in doing more case management type direct services, we could do that. We could always fall back on direct rental assistance. I don't know that we want to do that, but another fallback that we've talked about is just giving the money to Polk County Housing Trust Fund so that they can buy additional affordability for properties that are at their expiration date for their LIHTC tax credits. So those are properties that are currently affordable but set to go to market rate after the expiration of their tax credits. We would have the ability to buy additional years of affordability on those properties if we chose to. Cherry Street, I put that on there. As you all know, we had sent out an RFP to redevelop that site, and we got back, I think, 4 different proposals. All of them included some element of affordable housing, but we worked very, very closely with the economic development staff of the city of Des Moines, just because that's kind of their wheelhouse more so than ours. But we really honed in on a local developer who had affordability as one of the key elements of it, as well as green building practices, and some really neat ideas about kind of community engagement and community spaces in this property. They don't have the capacity to take on anything for at least a year or 2. And at that time, I believe the 4% tax credit process will become competitive, so it's just not even close to a sure thing right now. So the question is, do we use these funds to support affordable housing development at that site as well?
Without that developer.
With or without that developer. It's, do we want to use any of this money to supplement a developer coming in and doing affordable housing at that site? Again, everybody had proposed affordable housing as part of their proposals, but one of them had still a $26 million gap. And then the others couldn't get to work for 2 years. So do we want to use this money at all to incentivize
I'm not for
faster development or more affordability?
I like to see
And we-
something else there.
We have a draft form, and Sarah's working on it. We'll share with you when it's finished on a second RFP.
Yep.
From what we learned from the first process. So we'll share that with you.
Fine.
It's almost ready, right?
Yeah, I think they were just, they actually had a conversation with an entity out of Minneapolis yesterday. They walked them through the site, told them what some of our priorities are in terms of the development and the building practices. So they're gonna add that into the RFP, and we're gonna reissue it and hopefully get a little bit more specific proposals on what we're looking for.
So yeah, I'd encourage you all to take a close look at that, because you wanna know, this is a prime location.
Yeah,
that has an impact
very.
on not just housing, but on the whole downtown atmosphere and development, and getting this as best we can is important.
And then the last thing would be just kind of circling back to how we started this conversation. Do we use any of this money to incentivize regional partnerships, more collaboration, more conversations? I'm thinking about the work that we did right out of the gates with ARPA and the healthcare workforce, where we said, here's $1 million, you guys need to figure out a way to do this jointly and collaboratively, and they did. I don't know if there's anything that we want to brainstorm to incentivize more regional conversations and kind of collapsing some of these housing conversations into, 1 or 2 conversations instead of 6. So, do you
That's
wanna
been
add
my
any-
concern, just from an observation of this, because I didn't know housing, and I've learned
Yeah.
more in the last 2 years on housing than I ever knew. But what I see is more of maybe it's too strong, but community failure to come together and have one overall arching plan for both housing and homelessness. We got so many different organizations doing different studies. Consultants are making a heyday off this whole region on doing housing studies, but
There's 3 or 4
we've gotta
consultants going on.
get one at the
Yeah.
same table.
I agree. So we could talk about that for sure.
And then this money could be used for,
It would probably have to be a grant that is made to an organization, so then it's considered expended on our end. Or we could assign it to the administrative costs or the interest earnings and then that gives us more
that's our flexible
yep,
money.
That's our flexible funds, yep,
So we're open to ideas of
yep.
Okay.
how we, a catalyst for
housing summit kind of thing.
You know, the example I used was back on that correlation between vacancy rate and homelessness. So we know what our current vacancy rate is, we know what our population is, and as a community, regional community, we should be able to figure out how many housing units we have, and then how many more we need, irrespective of affordability, just how many housing units we need to get that vacancy rate up to 8%, which we know will reduce homelessness. Okay, then we get a number. We know exactly what we need to build in this region for housing. Then we got everyone at the same table. Okay, who's taking what pieces of this and how we get into that number? It's a very quantifiable objective and goal, but we're not all together on accomplishing this comprehensively.
All right, let's hear from Anawim.
Okay, Cynthia, do you? Yeah.
And I may cut out early to go to the Metro Managers meeting where this will be
That's fine. We talked about?
one of the discussions, yeah.
Hello, good morning. I've asked Dana Jurgensen from West Bank and a member of our board of directors to join me as well today, so he can provide some supplementary information. So as you all know, Anawim Housing acts housing on a couple of different places on the spectrum. On the housing spectrum, we provide affordable housing through development and property management. We preserve affordable housing, and we're also the provider for permanent supportive housing within our community. Our permanent supportive housing is what I'm going to talk about first, and there's really three things to talk about today. The first thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is with our permanent supportive housing, that is HUD-funded continuum of care funding, that the city of Des Moines is the recipient and Anawim Housing is the subrecipient. Of the total dollars that come into our community, Anawim gets 60% of those dollars. The bulk of the dollars we receive are rental assistance dollars that pass through to pay rents for 239 households, both individuals and families. So Anawim has been operating these grants since 1996. Our largest and oldest grant is serving 129 households, both families and individuals. For the past 26 years, Anawim has received $77,000 a year total to serve that population, in addition to the rental assistance dollars. So the cost to operate all of our Anawim housing, permanent supportive housing programs is about $1.1 million in addition to the funding that we receive through HUD. Of course, because it's HUD federal dollars, there's a number of restrictions that are based on what are allowable costs. Those are all outlined in the 24 CFR 578, very, very specific. The bulk of that is, again, rental assistance. Interestingly enough, utilities are not included as an allowable cost unless they are included in the cost of the rent. And the way our programs are set up and the contract we have to operate them, they all are under a master lease. So Anawim leases 239 units across Polk County with a number of landlords. We have about 40 landlords, all of them for-profit organizations. We sign the master lease and we sublease to people that qualify for our programs. And every person qualifies for our program to be referred, centralized intake. They must have a qualifying disability and they must be able to demonstrate, in many cases, chronicity. More than half of the individuals we serve in our permanent supportive housing have zero income, even though they may or may not qualify for Social Security benefits. That's a whole other conversation. So as a result, Anawim, beyond the costs that are allowable to be reimbursed through HUD, pays $200,000 annually for our utilities for these households, and we pay an additional about $50,000 to pay for renters insurance. 95% of the population that is referred to us remains in housing. That means that 5% of the households that come into our housing, we end up terminating them from our programming. The reasons for termination would be extreme violence, arson, fires, extreme destruction. Part of what allows us to be so successful in retaining people in housing is our commitment to the Housing First model. That means that we undertake really heroic efforts to retain people in housing, because as we're talking about the housing continuum, Anawim Housing serves the hardest to serve people in our community. So if we had an opening today, centralized intake would look through every person who is currently living outside, and they would say, who is the sickest person today that is living outside, and that's who we would be putting immediately into our housing. So there is no criminal background check. The only two populations we exclude from our housing is, number one, if they are currently restricted by the 2,000-foot rule, and two, if they are known to be an active arsonist. Those are two things that cause us to have to pause and say, we cannot take that risk. Otherwise, the risk, because we are the master lease holder, is all on Anawim. So we have done this very successfully for 26 years. Unfortunately, the time has come where we can no longer afford as an organization, without more community financial support, to continue to offer this high level of service for our community. We understand that there is a huge impact if we're not able to operate, in particular, the largest Anawim consolidated grant. That grant we voluntarily reallocated through the HUD process this year, which means we voluntarily return these dollars, and the local continuum of care, Homeward, created a competition. So anyone could come in and compete for these dollars and then operate the grants. There was no applications other than Anawim Housing's application. It is because these grants and the risk to any organization that takes these on is very, very significant. So part of our ask today is to talk about ongoing support, whether or not funding comes directly from Polk County, or Polk County leads the charge in talking with other for-profit or governmental agencies about supporting us. But the ongoing cost of $1.1 million is not sustainable for our organization any longer. So that is the first part of the conversation. Does anybody want to ask questions, or do you want me to jump into the next kind of ongoing stability of Anawim Housing?
So we're clear, the stability of $1.1 million you can't sustain any longer.
Yes.
And we cannot use ERA2 money for this match.
That's correct. We can't use ER2 money.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So the second part is there is a use for the ERA2 money that we've identified within our organization. We have a 31-unit scattered whole properties that we wholly own, that are tired. It needs some work done to it. So we would be looking to request about $1 million to do the necessary upkeep and improvements to that property, and then attach that additional 20 years of affordability to the project at the 50% of AMI. So we are in the process of creating a full proposal to submit to you, and I expect to have that to you by the end of the week. And so that would be our second ask to you. And then finally, the third ask, and I'm going to actually ask Dana to step up and support me through this, Dana in his capacity as both West Bank and as our board member.
Cynthia, before he speaks, where is that property that you're asking to get repaired?
Sure, it's scattered site. I can get a, yes, it's scattered
Okay,
site. Yep.
That's good enough.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So Anawim has financial difficulties that have been forthright with, and they've tried to kind of right the ship of the organization. They were in a large hole last year. I think Cynthia was around $2.5 million was about the shortfall. And I joined the board last year, and it kind of, I guess, helped shine the light on what the shortfall of the organization was. They've made great strides during the course of 2024. That should be almost reduced to about a $300,000 operating loss. And they've kind of covered that through prior ERC money that came down through the federal program. But that is running out, and they've asked not only West Bank, but I've told them to objectively go seek other banks for some short-term credit to get them through what appears to be a difficult window, which will be the end of this year and into early 25. They have three things that could be sustainable to get the organization further. One is the sale of a project wholly owned called Pioneer Woods. They have an offer in hand for $3 million. They need to pay off about $400,000 in first mortgage debt, so that would net the organization, say, somewhere around $2.4 million. They have two grants out requested with the Federal Home Loan Bank. Each are for $3 million. One actually is to refurbish Pioneer Woods. The other $3 million is to refurbish a property called Legacy Park. Out of those grants, Anawim would be able to pull $450,000 each for a developer fee, but that won't be determined until basically January of 2025. So we have this window of 60 days where looking at, and maybe Cynthia could speak exactly, but the cash drain could put the organization negative probably around Christmas time. And as a bank, our bank, and again, I've told them to go elsewhere. I'm not trying to be the only one they look at, because looking at through lens of both a board member and someone who's a banker at West Bank, we can't provide credit with the unknowns that are out there. So the suggestion that I've had is we could provide credit if we had an acceptable guarantor. That would mean they need about $500,000 probably to have some assurance they can get through this window, you know, with those three positive things that they could not even need the funding. But we can't provide it with the operating losses that they have. And so, again, it could be a government, guarantee. It could be an individual if they had a constituent that wanted to step up. But right now, they don't have that. So I believe the ask today is for Polk County to provide a guarantee of a $500,000 line of credit to West Bank that we would give them to hopefully get them through this, what is maybe not even be necessary, but it is a short-term window that if they don't have it, end of the year, they could not have money to cash flow their programs and operations. So we're not asking for the loan from anybody, but we need a guarantor.
Does that mean you still sell off that property?
Yes, they are. Dustin got a. I'll let you speak on that.
We currently have two offers. We asked for final and best by the end of today, so we will know by next
I
week.
assume you're selling it because of your strained cash position.
Yes.
Does that put, but that it sounds like a property that actually self-sustains?
It is.
So I always worry about selling off assets that are actually cash flowing to cash flow the operation that's not flowing. Is there any way to hold on? What's the opportunity to hold on?
Really looked at it from every single different angle, and the opportunity to bring in, quite honestly, a couple $1 million. That allows us to look at other potential projects in the future that will also help to cash flow our organization. And we do have other properties that are beginning to cash flow. So we've had to take a look at our operations throughout, obviously, every place. Where can we cut and where can we improve? And there was a lot of room to improve our operations of our existing LIHTC projects and our wholly owned projects. So part of the ERAP $2 that we would be asking for would be helping our other wholly owned properties at the 31 units to help them cash flow better as well.
speak on that question, actually. So coming to the board, I think the issue was, and Cynthia was new to the actual taking over her role last year as well. I think what I uncovered right away as both a banker and a new board member and someone who kind of understood the financials is what we're asking to do with Pioneer Woods is part of what was done kind of every couple of years to provide cash flow to the organization, which shouldn't have been done. And you're asking, well, how did the grant that they're asking for the sustainable funds for? And that's what they would do. That's what the prior leadership would do, would sell a property. It would kind of fund the grant for a couple more years, and then they'd have to do it again. Well, for their organization, that's not sustainable. You can't do that over and over again. And so we're hoping to look to do this no more than one more time, because yes, properties that are cash flowing, they should maintain, because that provides, everything else back to the mission. But nobody was able to say to prior leadership, wait, why are you doing this? Or ask the question, why are you doing this? Why does this need to be done? So this is kind of like, what we hope for is one time, and then from the excess that after we up, that's going to then go to a separate fund. We'll have administrative say over what we do in the future with those funds. So, sorry, I hope that helps.
So, when we met, I really don't, it's a short-term line of credit.
Yes.
6 months, sorry.
6 months?
When at least, 6 months, probably just to make sure we give window for all these, in case. I think the purchase agreement is supposed to be a 90-day execution, but
Yep.
nothing ever happens in 90
Right.
days.
So there might be constitutional prohibitions that stop the county from lending or credit or assuming liabilities of private corporations, which we may need to discuss and research further before the board makes a decision.
Okay.
We've talked around about that as well, but it's the same reason we can't indemnify people we contract with. So there could be some issues there that we would need to look into from a legal perspective.
Okay, well, then my next comment was I didn't have a problem with it. Apparently I do.
Was this,
Okay.
the second thing you talked about, the being eligible for because we talked about this, the eligibility for the grant, to capture the grant money, right? No, you had some. Yeah.
The 1.1 million? Yeah, I'm not, that's not,
Okay, okay.
that's ongoing. That's for her sustainability. I don't know where she gets that.
Okay,
That's forever.
okay, but I thought you were.
That's not a Polk
You were
County
looking for something
responsibility.
that qualified you for some grant money, and I didn't remember which pot that was from, yeah.
Yeah, it was the ERAP 2 for the 31 units.
Yeah, that's
yes.
if we want to participate in helping you with the 30 units or 31 units.
Right.
Yeah, that's not an issue for me. But the 1.1 million of ongoing expenses
No, that wasn't-
forever, that's a
That
problem.
wasn't what I was referring to. I was referring to that
Yeah.
one-time thing that helped you, that
Yeah.
leverage the eligibility for some grant money, right? Well, that's ongoing. Oh,
Right,
okay.
right.
That's ongoing.
Yep.
And we'll have to figure out this legal issue because I thought we could, but maybe we can't, I don't know.
There might be a way of using some of the interest money off of the interest, that,
For the 500,000?
yeah, and just, and it's,
Application or a cash guarantee would be maybe
yeah,
some way you
yeah,
could do that.
yeah.
There may be more ways to skin this cat.
And,
We can
and,
look at it.
and then back to this scattered site, this $1 million. Yeah, I mean, I think getting a breakdown of what we're doing, what's involved in that, and then, what is the value of the net assets, and obviously, there's 31 units, how many people are living in those units, and obviously, what happens if you don't get this money? I mean, it's my understanding some of this is furnace and air conditioners and.
Yeah. Yep, we'll have a full scope to you by the end of the week on what that project is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then, I guess this question comes back to, how do you address this long-term, structural deficit as it relates to this 1.1 million. I mean, how do you stay afloat as an organization long-term?
Right, so obviously, without that grant, without the allocated, or the two grants that were initially, that Anawim consolidated, if we return those to the city, it would be up to the city to figure out if they operate those or not. If not, that would be 129 households that would lose their housing, supportive housing assistance. Right, so not only does Anawim act as the landlord on these units and incur all of the extra damages. If a person dies in the unit, we're responsible for body cleanup. If a person sets the unit on fire, we're responsible for, as the master leaseholder. So the owners of those properties do not incur those costs. Anawim does, right? So those 120, well, and we also provide all of the supportive services. So that means that sometimes we're taking people to the doctor, sometimes we're working on civil commitments. We're providing end-of-life care, or coordinating for end-of-life care. Our largest attrition from our housing units is through death. So we have an aging population that we're serving. We're serving about half of those individuals, our families. So what that would do is we would say we can no longer shoulder the burden of housing essentially all of the permanent supportive housing units within this community. We could shoulder half of it, and we would return those two grants, or would not accept the grants when they're awarded.
And that's 129 units.
That's 129 units, and allow the city of Des Moines to decide how they're going to continue on. Keeping in mind that when there was the open opportunity to apply for the grant, there were no other applicants.
Have you started those conversations with Des Moines to say, what if this happens?
Yep. Yeah. And we've been told nobody has any money. There is no one who has money. So we've had conversations across any number with grant funders, with, most grantors do not fund operations, and they want to fund for 1 year and then want to know how we're going to be sustainable. And the problem is that we know what it takes to house this population. They are a very hard to serve population, very hard to serve. However, we've been successful in doing that at a cost of $1 million annually to Anawim. And again, we've shouldered that for many, many years, selling off properties, every dollar going into continuing this, but we cannot anymore do that. So we become a very sustainable organization if we remove at least half of those. I think it's reasonable for Anawim to pay $400,000 to $500,000 to serve this population. I mean, I think that we're asking for the community as a whole to step up, whether that is for-profit entities, companies, foundations, whatever it is, to come in and help Anawim shoulder this burden. The result, if those families return and individuals return to homelessness, is catastrophic. The overall cost to the community will go up far more than $1 million.
Any other questions? Do you have any other closing comments over there? Annie, you got anything to say? No? Okay. All right. It's a tough
Thank you.
issue. Thank you. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, so the last thing is now we need to start thinking about what is our ongoing role in addition to this convening, but then what's the ongoing role here we want to play in this issue?